Okay, hello again. This is Dolores Cannon with the Metaphysical Hour. And I hope everybody had nice holidays because, last week because of New Year's, Don shut down and just played music. So I guess we're back now with the live shows. So I hope everybody had a nice holiday season. But before we get going, I want to give out the toll-free number. The toll-free number, just in case anyone does want to call in, is 877-876-5227. 877-876-5227. And that number is good all over the world. Okay. Now, tonight I've got a special guest on here. Phyllis, I haven't known you as long as some of the other ones I've had on the show, but I try to keep the guests to people that I know. It makes it a little easier on me anyway.
Oh, well, I appreciate being here.
All right. Well, our guest tonight is Phyllis Galde, and she is the publisher and the editor of Fate magazine. And I know there's a lot of our listeners are very familiar with that magazine because I know I've been reading it for 50 years at least. So it's been around a long time. So we're going to be discussing Phyllis and what she's involved with and the magazine for the next hour here. Well, Phyllis, before we get going, I always like to know about the person. Let's tell people about yourself.
You really want to know?
How you got into all of this and everything.
Well, I was just a normal North Dakota Norwegian farm girl growing up on a farm with 4 older brothers. And a very normal family. I guess I was probably the one who wasn't so normal.
Are any of us normal?
Well, I would see a ghost in my room every night when I was a small child.
Oh.
And that scared me quite a bit, and everybody else probably thought I was hallucinating. And then finally, when I was about 25 years old, after I'd grown up and then come back home, and my mother informed me that my grandfather died in that room.
Oh. Well, I thought, it said in your bio that you grew up in a haunted house.
Yes. And I mean, if they would have told me that when I was young, it would have spared me a lot of anxiety and grief because I thought that was a bad ghost and he was coming there to hurt me. I mean, I could see him. I could physically see him standing there in the doorway every night.
You didn't know it was your grandfather?
No, not when I was young. I just saw this male figure, so kind of like in the movie Poltergeist, just kind of a wispy white image, and it was standing in the doorway, so I had no idea.
Did you ever tell your parents?
Yeah, all the time. I would get up, I would shut my eyes, and I would dash through the doorway there, and I would go into their bedroom and climb in bed with them because I was so scared. And they would even try to lock me out of their room. Of course, in these old farmhouses, you don't have locks on the doors, so they would stick a kitchen and table knife up in the door to try to pry it so I couldn't get it open, and I would just be frantic. It must have ruined their marital life.
I'm surprised they wouldn't have said something back then about him dying in there.
Well, I think she was just trying to, not encourage my imagination.
Oh, yeah, because they figured if they told you about it might make things worse. But
Yeah, that was the old farm style. But then after I grew up, my mother started telling me that when she was first married, she would hear footsteps at night and on the stairway, and there'd be nobody home except her.
Yeah.
So she was pretty sensitive, too. She just didn't, when I was growing up, she just kind of wanted to poo-poo it a little bit so I wouldn't get carried away.
Well, there wasn't any way you could move or anything, so you had to stay there.
Right, exactly.
No matter if it's haunted or not. Well, did anything else ever happen in the house besides just seeing the ghost in the room?
After I grew up and got married and moved away and got divorced, and I came back to stay in the house. My parents lived in a mobile home in the summertime on the farm to help my brother after they had retired.
Yeah.
And so I came back to live in that old haunted house all by myself with just wood heat. It's all I had. It was very, very primitive at this point because no one had lived there for a long time. But a cat and a dog, and I stayed there probably 2 winters. Oh. And it was 50 below one winter, actual temperature in North Dakota, and that's not wind chill.
Wow.
And, yes, if I wouldn't have got up to fix the stove, fix the wood fire several times a night. I probably would have frozen to death. But anyway, I would sit and play the piano in the dining room. I had an old upright piano, and I would play hymns and whatever. And I could kind of see these elderly people sitting around in the living room just listening to me.
Oh.
And it wasn't scary because my grandfather paid for a lot of immigrants to come over from Norway. He would pay, it probably cost like $40, which is not much today, but back then that was a huge amount of money in the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s.
Yeah.
And then they would have to work off their passage on the farm, whether it was housekeeping or whatever, because my grandfather, that's a good gossip story. Like, my grandmother left my grandfather. Nobody got divorced back in 1915.
But back in those days, people didn't get divorced.
No, that was quite a scandal. But anyway, I would be scared. There was only one room I would dare sleep in at night, upstairs. I wouldn't dare leave the bedroom. Even if I had to go to the bathroom, I waited till dawn because it was like crowds of people standing outside my doorway looking at me and watching me. Just all kinds of ghosts, and I just wondered if some of them maybe were those old Scandinavian people who had worked there, like housekeepers and farm help. And then
you think it might have been the ones that your grandfather brought over? Then?
Probably so. I can only guess because they were totally harmless, but it was kind of scary. And then I got involved in spiritualism.
Uh-huh.
So when my daughter was in high school and my nieces and nephews, we would have seances. I learned how to do a seance at the Spiritualist Church. So we would do seances in the living room. We would put blankets over the window and black out everything and wait till midnight, and we would say a prayer and all put our hands on the table and have a candle and sing Jesus Loves Me. That's about the only hymn everybody knew. And then turn out the lights, and then, oh my gosh, did we have some interesting phenomena.
I would think you would have been afraid to do that after growing up like that.
Well, there's like 8 or 9 of us, so there's safety in numbers.
There was, bravery with more people there.
Exactly, and we'd have a beer or something beforehand, so we had a little bottle courage too. But we treated it pretty respectfully, and we had a lot of interesting messages. And so my grandfather came one time, and he put his hands over our hands.
Yeah.
And you could feel his scratchy palm, work-worn palm, and then he came to tell us that he was moving on to another level. And we cried. We just absolutely we weren't real knowledgeable, but it was definitely a profound experience. And then one time, one girl almost got pulled across the table. There were probably some lesser evolved entities there.
Uh-huh.
And my one nephew is a pretty good hypnotist, and he would hypnotize somebody to act as our medium so they could see and feel who was there.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you could do that or not. Did they pick up on who it was then?
Yes. And we had a lot of family people come through. My grandmother came through. My grandfather came through. We heard sounds. We heard voices. We just had some really interesting phenomena that occurred. We did this for like a couple, 3 summers. And we figured out that doorway to that little bedroom where I slept was really a vortex to another dimension.
Well, because, like a portal to a dimension?
Exactly, because a lot of people who stayed in that room had strange experiences. It wasn't just me, so I think it was an actual portal. So then
I lived in a haunted house. My husband was in Vietnam, but that was back in the 60s. So, and I didn't have any choice. I had to stay there. It was in a city, though. It was in St. Louis. But, I didn't have any choice. I couldn't go anywhere. I had to wait there till he got back. But It was a 2-story house, and all the noises and everything were always on the upstairs part. So I know what you mean. We had a lot of very strange things that we knew were not people in the house, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, those skeptics out there that say there isn't any such things, there is, but I never had anything, they never tried to hurt anybody.
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it's scary when you hear sounds and hear doors opening and closing and people going up and down the steps when you know there's not anybody there.
Well, exactly, and being, a young person, you don't expect this. You're not creating this, or it's not one's imagination, because lots and lots of people heard and felt things in our house. And
I always say that I had a Siamese cat. And I would sit downstairs in the living room when the kids were asleep upstairs, and that cat would sit at the bottom of the steps looking up the stairs, and he's sitting there with his tail going back and forth the way they do when they're watching something.
Mm-hmm.
And that used to give me the creeps. I said, "Will you go and catch a mouse or something?"
Well, sure, because they can see things that we can't. And
they
say that, cats are real sensitive to spirits.
Yeah, cats and dogs. I think cats can see them more than the dogs can.
That's what I've heard, too.
Mm-hmm. But it's a little creepy when you see it doing it. And I said, no, I'd just rather just ignore it,
That's right, yep.
But then, anyway, you having a background like that, I could see why you did want to get into the metaphysical.
Well, sure, I wanted answers, I guess, and I was always interested in, like, Frankenstein and Dracula movies. So I wasn't the normal farm kid. I was a little bit different, but the unseen world always fascinated with me. I always wanted to know what's on the other side.
Uh-huh. I've had lots of friends on the show who are genuine psychics, and they experienced stuff since childhood. But they were lucky. The ones who were still doing it, their parents didn't try to tell them it was crazy, and to stop it. So they just thought it was natural, and they developed it over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's better to do that, but, the parents are always worried about people thinking the kid's crazy or something. And,
sure, there's a monster under the bed.
Oh, yeah.
And there probably is. There probably are some astral entities that small children actually can see those things.
Yeah. But like you were saying, I think the only ones that I've ever heard of causing any problems are the lesser evolved entities that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Ones that are kind of more or less trapped in the earth plane.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never really heard of anybody being hurt by any of these anyway. Of course, you may have with the magazine.
Well, yes, we've had people who have gotten scratched and bitten and possessions. One time, I was almost pulled out of the bed. That kind of really freaked me out.
Oh, no, I wouldn't like that.
No, and I mean, I was having some Kundalini experiences, and I was fasting and meditating and spending a lot of time alone. But one night, it was like I was just kind of rolling out of bed that I couldn't stop myself.
Well, we see, we got as far in your life as when you were doing the seances, and, of course, you never had, you said you did have some strange things occur with that, but then what did you do after that, then?
I became a school teacher. I taught school for about 10, 12 years.
So you were the normal one that way, anyway.
Yes, but except I always wanted to teach science fiction and fantasy and mythology and Lord of the Rings, so I always had an interest in the edges, I guess the fringe, but I was in kind of a conservative teaching environment, and of course anything ESP was equated with witchcraft, and if you were interested, if you read the horoscope, then you were it was almost like a fundy kind of environment.
Yeah,
I had to be very careful.
I live here in Arkansas in this little bitty town. I can't even tell them what I do. They think I'm strange enough because I travel. So anything like that is still viewed as the work of the devil and everything. But I keep thinking we're moving out of it, but we have these little towns that are still like that.
Yes,
I know what you're talking about, but you grew up in that kind of an environment anyway. Yes. But you live up around Chicago, don't you?
No, I actually live near Minneapolis now.
Minneapolis, okay. I keep thinking of Chicago because that's where fate started out.
That's